Welcome to the Rising Phoenix Rise, Recover and Rebuild podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Demiri, founder of Create Again, Breakup, Mindset and Life Coaching. A large number of people are either thinking about separating, are in the middle of a separation, or are already divorced. Chances are that you're in one of those categories, and if not, know someone that is. While separation and divorce is a normal part of life, there's still a stigma attached, and no one really talks about what it is like to go through this experience, and even less what to do to rebuild yourself. I will be interviewing mothers and business owners, lawyers, and a variety of other people I believe can provide some tips and insight into their lives, and I'm certain you will be able to relate to some of it. If you feel that anything in today's episode resonates with you, make sure to book your 30-minute complimentary session with me today. I would love the opportunity to be part of your rebuilding journey. But now let's get started with today's guest. Good morning, lovely humans. It is indeed morning. I have gotten up early today to speak to the lovely Katie in the US. Katie is a divorced mom to 2 young children and has been co-parenting with her ex-husband for over 4 years now. So she is a co-parenting coach who specialises in high-conflict co-parenting relationships and believes in teaching others how to set and enforce boundaries, how to use different techniques to communicate effectively, and how to make positive changes that will help you co-parent peacefully. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for getting up early for me.
No, I'm so grateful that you agreed to come onto my podcast. So thank you so very much. I really appreciate it. Now, first of all, I've been following you on Instagram for quite some time, but just because I've been following you doesn't mean that my listeners know who you are and what you do. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became a co-parenting coach.
Oh, man. So I think that for me, starting the co-parenting coach journey was mostly about trying to teach people what I wish I would have known when I was first divorcing about co-parenting. There are so many things that you don't know going into it that are so difficult to figure out on your own that I thought, well, it would be really awesome to teach people from someone who's been through it how to do it and how it works, and some easier tips and tricks to make it function more smoothly. So, and my divorce was a little bit high conflict, you could say, at first, and we've slowly gotten to be able to communicate better, and things have calmed down, but it was hard at first. So I definitely can sympathize with people who've been through hard things like that.
Yeah. I can't relate because I don't have children, but I can certainly, even without children, relate how challenging it is to go through a separation and divorce. And that already is a challenge in itself, so I can't even imagine what it would be like having little humans involved in that process.
Man, yeah. It's really, really hard. And I know that when I first started my Instagram account, which I think is where you found me, that was more just to kind of spread the word and help people out. And then that it just kind of blew up. And so I thought, well, it would be so great to help other people. So here we are.
Yeah, awesome. Now I have my first question for you. So when separating, obviously the little people in our lives are often the ones that suffer to an extent the most. What are the biggest mistakes parents make when children are involved in a separation? What do you think?
Oh man, I tend to feel like the biggest mistake that parents make is involving their kids too much in the drama that's happening between the two parents. I think that giving them way too much information about why you're divorcing. Of course, they need to know that you are, but they don't need to know the specifics or the details behind it. They don't need to know your specific, saying I'm sad or mom and dad are really sad that we have to separate, but then going crazy and telling them all of the things that you're sad about, all of the things that have happened. I think that can really do a disservice to kids, especially when they then feel like they need to be your support system.
Yeah, that I can probably imagine how hard that must be for kids. I mean, I think it's important to involve them, to sort of, to a certain extent, let them know, look, we are upset, and, you know, we still love you, but it's better for us all if we are not together, I guess, to an extent.
Right. And I think that when you sit down and have that conversation, it looks very different for each family, for depending on how old the kids are, and, you know, what your kids need, and all of that stuff. So I think it's a really personal situation to be in, but you just have to be so careful that you're not bringing out too many of your feelings and making the kids, maybe, because, you know, one of the things that I learned going through divorce was that my kids really felt how I felt, and they also felt how their father felt. So they really can sense things. So just trying not to bring them into the middle of the conflict and into the middle of all the details is so important. Yeah.
Now, when you're saying all of that, try not to obviously involve them with that. What are some good ways to communicate with each other on how to communicate it to the children that is sort of age appropriate?
Gosh, it depends so much on the kids. But I think that if you can, I know that you can't always, but if you can, sitting down together so that you're presenting a united front for each other, for the kids, to explain that you are divorcing and that this is what's happening. Here's where we're going to live. Here's who's going where, what's our schedule. I think that being more intentional about giving the information that just revolves around the kids is really important. And if you can do it together, like I said, awesome. But sometimes you can't. So if you can't do it together, I think it would be important for you to try to figure out which parent would be maybe not better, but which parent would be the one who could provide that information to the kids in the most calm way. And when you're dealing with high conflict situations, sometimes that doesn't happen at all, but it would be ideal for things to happen that way. And
I guess the sort of parent that could relate it best is often the main caregiver, would you say? Or is that often the other person?
I feel like that's probably true. But again, it depends on who's on what part of their journey in the divorce. And that's why it's just such a personal decision to make. But I oftentimes think that the high conflict parent will be the one who wants to give that information just because they are so upset and they're so confrontational and they're so they have to be the good one, the one that the kids love and the one that the kids trust. And it's not, we all know that kids love both their parents no matter what, but sometimes I really do feel like it's the high conflict parent who wants to be the one to present that information, but then it has the potential to just go so wrong. So that's why you just have to be so careful about who says what.
And how or what would you communicate to your child when you do have a bad day? Like, obviously we all have our bad days in general anyway, but especially during a separation, as you were saying, kids observe so much, then they realize more than what we give them credit for, I think. And they do realize that you have a bad day, you might be upset and have a bit of a cry. And how do you communicate those things with them?
So my kids were 1 and 3 when I got divorced. And I think it was a lot easier for me because they were so little that it was easy to put them to bed and then go and cry or whatever I had to do. But I think it's okay to be honest about, mommy or daddy is sad and it's okay to be sad. But I always try to avoid saying like, mommy or daddy's really sad because I am still in love with mommy and I don't want to get divorced or whatever. I think it's okay to say how you're feeling. Maybe just try to avoid giving too many of those details about the why behind it. Because the kids, like you said, kids are smart. They'll know that you're probably sad about the divorce, but I just always try so hard to keep all of the extra details out of it.
And I think, and again, I'm not a parent, but I think it's still important to show them the emotion, not do it all behind closed doors. I guess when you got divorced and the age of the children, that was a little bit easier to do it behind closed doors. But I would think showing them that you're upset is important as well, to teach them it's okay to have feelings and to show your feelings and don't hide them away, because that's what they grow up with. They think they have to hide their emotions and, not being able to display how they feel.
Absolutely. And I still, I just started to probably last year really recover from my divorce. So it was a long process because we're coming up on 4.5 years. So that's not to say that there weren't moments when my kids would see me upset or cry, or, sometimes when things were really, really high conflict with my ex-husband, they would say, "Mommy, you seem really mad." And I'm like, "Oh, I am really mad." But it was important for me to say, you know what, Daddy and I, we had a little disagreement about whatever, about school, but we're going to work it out together. So yes, Mommy and Daddy are upset with each other, but we're going to figure it out. Yeah. So they know, like we said a million times before, they know when things are wrong or when things are, when you're frustrated or sad. But I think it's important for them to see that, of course, but just being intentional about how you say what's happening is the more important piece.
Yeah. And we were talking about working together as a parent, what are like the best ways, or how can parents work together to make the situation as easy as possible on the children, especially I guess when it's high conflict as well, but also when it's not so high conflict? What are some ways?
So I think that if you could, it would be ideal for you both to sit down and say, before you write up I'm not sure what they're called in where you are, like a parenting plan or a custody agreement. Yeah. So before you sit down and write those up, if you're getting along well, it makes so much sense to sit down and say, well, so what do you think would work best for you? What do you think would work best for our kids? What would work best for the situation that we have going on now? So that when you do divorce, things go smoothly. When you start living in different homes, when you start, you're each shuttling the kids different places, it makes a lot of sense to sit down together and just really think about what's best for the kids first. And then you as parents kind of as a secondary thing. Now, obviously that's way more difficult when things are high conflict because it's hard to sit down together. But I always say, if you can get a mediator, or I don't know what they're called in Australia. If you can sit down with a mediator, that's always a little bit cheaper than a lawyer, but you may have to go the lawyer route too, especially in those high conflict situations.
Yeah. And I do know a few people that are having a parenting plan in place, and some components of that worked a little bit easier than others. And sometimes, yes, a mediator has to be involved just to, again, support or bring it back to, bring it back to the kids and their needs and what's important here, rather than, parents getting back into a conflict or, And
I don't know, I always say that a parenting plan or a custody agreement is like your Bible. Yeah. And so you really need one in order to be able to hold each parent accountable for their part of taking care of the kids. Yeah. So that's just my shameless plug for everyone needs a parenting plan or custody agreement, whatever you call it. You need it. Yeah. You must have it.
Yeah. So I think it's important as well. I think it's a part of having a boundary, so to speak, to sort of say, okay, look, these particular holidays are for me and these particular holidays are for you. Like Father's Day is for you, Mother's Day is for me. Right. If it falls on a weekend that you normally have the kids, then we just have to make like a swap and like maybe have you have the kids for 2 weekends and I have the kids for 2 weekends after. It just helps so much. And
absolutely.
And do you think that a parenting plan needs to evolve as well based on the age and changing needs of the children?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think that flexibility on both parents' part to recognize like, hey, for example, my ex-husband and I used to switch every 2 days with our kids because they were so little when we split. But now that they're older, we've moved to a 2 days, 5-day schedule, just because it's easier on the kids not to have so many transitions now that they're older. So I do think it's important to recognize when your kids are needing something different. Yeah. And now we're considering maybe going to 7 days on and then 7 days for the other parent, and then 7 days. So week on, week off. But if you don't ever take the time to look back at your parenting plan and figure out like what's working here and what's not working for the kids, then you're kind of stuck. They're stuck in the 4 years ago when they should be moving on to the now.
Yeah. And I guess also with like additional hobbies or friends starting to be involved in their daily lives, especially when it comes up to sort of early teenage years where, you know, they do want to hang out more with their friends than with their parents, being able to adapt
all of those
to
things. All of those things are so important. We had, now that my kids are older, we've been traveling more. So that was part of our parenting plan that we had to consider. Like, well, okay, so now we're wanting to take 2-week-long vacations. So maybe we need to rearrange things in our parenting plan about travel and out-of-state travel and all these other things that when kids are really little, you might not think about.
Yeah. And I guess we sort of touched on it. What's the best way to deal with the other parent when things are not exactly going according to the parenting plan? I mean, yes, we were saying mediator, but, you know, that's when you set up the parenting plan in the day-to-day life. Right. Sometimes things might not exactly happen how to set them out in the parenting plan.
Lots of times that's the case. So I think what I always tell my clients is that having strong boundaries, not only with your co-parent, but also with yourself, is so important, because if you can't hold your co-parent to a boundary that you have set, the boundary is useless. So you have to first be able to set that boundary and say, okay, self, we're not answering that phone call after 9 p.m. today. And you've explained to your co-parent that you're not answering it, but it's so tempting to answer the phone call or to answer the email or to, you know, do the thing you said you weren't going to do. But having those boundaries and holding them and knowing that that's going to help you have a better relationship with your co-parent in the long run, so important.
Yeah.
I can't even express. So important.
Yeah.
And then I always say too, if you can lessen the communication between the two of you during the times when things are really hard, that's important too. So knowing that email doesn't have to be answered right away, unless it's of importance, of course, but knowing that text message can wait a while, knowing that you're allowed to make a list of things that you want to consider talking to your co-parent about, but you don't have to address it in this moment. All of those things are so important, because the less communication you have during that time of high conflict, the easier it'll be for you in the long run.
Yeah, that's a good tip. Definitely. Thanks for that. And I guess now with the situation that you have changed, the days that you have your kids, for example, what do you do with yourself when the kids are with the other parent?
Oh man, that's such a struggle, especially at first. I found that a lot of parents really feel guilty enjoying their time without their kids. And I used to feel that way too, but it's so important when you are without your kids to do some things that you love to do, to do some things that maybe you wouldn't get to do when you had the kids, whether that's like go on a few dates or cook a big, expensive, wonderful meal that your kids would never eat, or run, or whatever it is that makes you feel good, do that. And then I also say that if you have things like grocery shopping, or maybe there's a project at work that you need to do a little bit of extra work on, getting those things done when you don't have your kids allows you to really enjoy the time that you do have your kids. Yeah. Because you're not doing that when they're with you, unless they love to grocery shop, in which case shop away. But, you know, all the things that maybe take away the time that you would spend with your kids when you have them, because now you only have them maybe 50% of the time or 20% of the time or whatever. So it always feels like those moments are so short. Yeah. Which is sad.
And I think, you know, they do grow up and one day they will leave the house. So, and I think that's what even a lot of married parents fall into the trap in, of not enjoying themselves or doing the things that they want to do when they have a bit of free time. They grow up one day, they will leave the house, and then you have really nothing to do with yourself.
Yeah, I have noticed that about myself, especially in the beginning when I got divorced. I didn't have any hobbies. I had to kind of learn what I liked again. And then along with learning what I like to do, I had to learn not to feel guilty about enjoying it when I didn't have the kids. So it's a process for sure. But I do think that's so important to just do some things that you love when you don't have your kids. And if you need to cry, go ahead and cry, feel your feelings, but like, don't live there for the entire week that they're gone. You have to, you have to force yourself once in a while to just do something fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. And when you do have sort of the transition with the handover of the kids, so, it's time to go to the other parent, what's the best way to make this transition easy? Like, is it I drop the kids off at school and you pick them up, or is it doing it face-to-face, or is there, a particular way that makes it the easiest for the kids to have this transition from one parent to the other?
I think it depends on the kids. My youngest child has always had a much harder time transitioning than my oldest. So my oldest, you could drop her off in a parking lot at the grocery store with her dad and she'd be fine, or you could drop her off at school with her dad, or, but my son has always been a little bit harder to, he needs a lot more reassurance and reminders, and he really needs to know, when are we doing this? Where are we doing this? And who am I going to, and for how long? So I think it's important to maybe make sure you do those things first. Let your kids know where they're going, how long they're going to be there, where you're going to get dropped off or picked up. And then you can kind of play with it to see what works best for everyone involved. Like when we were in the throes of the high conflict relationship, it was much more healthy for everyone involved to do the exchanges at school, because then Dad and I didn't see each other. Yeah. So there was no interaction. There was none of this like crazy face-to-face communication happening. It was just easy. Drop them off at school. Dad picks them up. Dad drops them off. I pick them up. So I think but if you have a great co-parenting relationship, it makes a lot of sense to maybe drop off at the house, or, maybe you guys go to a extracurricular event together and then you exchange from there. I think eventually you really find your groove when it comes to exchanges. Yeah.
And do you see sometimes that even parents, when they have been divorced a little bit longer or separated a bit longer, that they eventually do start to do more of those extracurricular activities together? Like, let's say, going to the kids' football game together and even have like dinner after, or, something along those lines, to just still have like this family component without being the same family as they used to be?
I think it varies so much based on, I'll give you an example. So my ex-husband and I used to celebrate some of our like Thanksgiving together and Christmas together, but then he got a new girlfriend. And so those things have since changed, but I really think it depends on who are you dating? Are they okay with you guys going to all these extracurricular activities and having meals together? Because that certainly changes things when new relationships start. And then just the level of comfort that we as individuals have with spending that time with our co-parent might be very different. I don't mind at all sitting next to each other at a game or a concert. I don't mind going out for like ice cream afterwards. But like I said, that's different now that my ex-husband has a girlfriend. So I think it really varies. But it's possible. It's possible.
And I think, sometimes it is great when you can have, especially the kid's birthday, and it's sort of like, okay, what do you want for your birthday? And then they were like, well, I want mommy and daddy, but I maybe also want daddy's new girlfriend or mommy's new boyfriend there as well. So, I mean, I guess that can sort of, give you heart palpitations at the beginning. But I guess if that's what the kid wants, one has to be adult enough as well to get through some of that to, make it as comfortable as possible for the child.
Yeah. And I do, like I said before, my ex-husband and I have been divorced for like 4.5 years now, but I do every now and then when my kids are so excited to go see his girlfriend, every now and then I'm like, man, that stings a little bit, and it shouldn't, and I love that they love her, and she is a really nice person and we get along great, but every now and then I'm like, oh man, that stung. But it's one of those things, I think it's just par for the course. You just have to deal with it and move on. But
yeah. And I think, she will never replace their mom, so never ever.
Oh, definitely not. Yeah. And that's an important thing to remember too. And it's like, these weird little pangs of feelings that you have every now and then that don't really have they don't really come from a place that makes sense. Yeah. They just are there, and you're like, okay, well, all right, so we're doing that today, but okay, and then move on. Yeah.
Now, I don't think there is really a typical sort of plan that you would go through with your clients, like, okay, we do this first, and then we talk about this, and then we learn about this. But what is sort of like, in inverted commas, a standard sort of coaching plan that you go through with people that come to and see you?
You're so right. It's so different depending on the person, but I really like to start out by figuring out like where the co-parenting relationship hurts, like what part of it is the worst for you. And then I find that once we get into that, we kind of trickle into like, well, how did you contribute to this situation? Because like you were saying earlier, sometimes people aren't aware that their behavior has something to do with what's happening. But anyway, so typically then we can kind of move into how are we going to have a little bit of growth and change and mindset shifts. But I also put a lot of emphasis on learning to communicate with your high conflict co-parent or your co-parent in general, and then learning to set boundaries. Those are there's always work about those two things for sure. Yeah. Typically more towards the beginning, and then we get more into the self-growth portion.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I think I have been given all the answers to all my questions, so thank you for that. But is there
you're welcome.
Is there anything that you feel that we haven't touched on that you would like to add to the conversation? Anything that you feel, especially because I'm not a parent, that I sort of missed in the conversation, or that we haven't gotten deep enough into?
I think you covered everything pretty well, but the only thing that I do always like to tell people is that this is a journey. It's not fast. It takes time like anything else. So even if things are hard right now, ride it out and it'll get better. Yeah, that's awesome. That's a good thing to remember. Thank you so much. Yeah, you're welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Katie, for being with me today and spending your time with me on this podcast. And I certainly hope we stay in touch. And I will pop all your details into the show notes as well. So if people are interested in working with you, even from Australia, they do get to contact you so they can find you.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much again for having me.
Thank you. Have a lovely rest of your day.
You as well.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much, Katie. There were so many golden nuggets in this episode. And although I am not a parent, one day I might be in a relationship where, I will be the partner of the other parent. So definitely some great tips that I can take away from that as well for myself. So thank you. I really appreciate your time today. If you decide you would like to work with me or would like to know a little bit more about what I do, reach out via call or message and book your 30-minute complimentary breakthrough session either through my website, createagain.com.au, my Instagram @createagain, or on Facebook @createagaincoach. I also have a private Facebook group which provides a safe space and gives you the opportunity to connect with other people that have been through a similar journey. If you enjoyed this episode, please share with your friends, like, comment and share. I'm so grateful that you have listened today and hope to welcome you back next week. Thank you.